Hello everyone, welcome back to Transfer Weekly. This now episode number 3 here on Feeder Series. I'm your host, Chris McCarthy. Joining me on this week, you would have remembered him from Series 1, representing the Feeder Series. He covers GB3 and GB4 and also the stuff over in the UAE as well, the Feeder Series over there. Welcome back to the show, George Brabner.
Hey, great to be back. Lots of interesting transfers coming up over the winter, and lots of exciting news on the way, I think.
Yeah, and our special guest this week, we have a returning face and a brand new face as well. One of the voices of the Euro Formula Open and someone who has worked in Formula 2. So very handy that we have him on this week. Welcome to the show, Chris Stevens. Great to have you on, mate.
Oh, thanks, Chris. It's great to be here. Looking forward to chatting some Feeder Series stuff with you.
Before we get into transfers, I mean, that's obviously what this show's about. We're going to be talking in this one. We've got transfers coming up from both Formula 2 and F1 Academy, which we are going to get into. We're going to talk a little bit about some of the junior teams' calendars as well, and also Macau. But before we get into any of that, Chris, you, of course, were part of the commentary team along with George Morgan as well for Euro Formula Open. It was your first season this year. Tell us how that experience was being part of the team this year.
It was really good. And even though the Euro Formula grid isn't massive, but the quality of drivers you find in there is fantastic. And the wheel-to-wheel action is just unbelievable. Even with the small number of cars we always get a good fight in there. And of course, Noel Leon was champion this year, the young Mexican. And I'm really looking forward to seeing how he goes. His place in Formula 3 is not confirmed yet, but we highly anticipate he'll be amongst the Formula 3 grid next year. So I'm really looking forward to seeing how he gets on, because he was such a different driver from the start of the season in Portimao to when the season finished in Barcelona.
Absolutely. I think the likes of Christian Mansell, for example, who came out that series, did really well in Formula 3, didn't he? So excited to see how he does. We'll talk a little bit more about stuff about Macau. He was one of the drivers over in Macau, of course, was Noel Leon. Let's come on to that now, George. I want to come to you as well. The 70th running of the Macau Grand Prix. It was fantastic to have it back again. What a grid we had as well. Why don't you give us a little run through of some of the things that went down over at the Macau Grand Prix?
Yeah, I mean, the big story has got to be Luke Browning and his domination, really. Fastest in qualifying, then dominates the qualifying race, dominates the main race on Sunday. To be honest with you, I don't know. I don't think there was really much more he could do to make that weekend more impressive. To be honest with you, really fast all weekend. And as someone who we kind of anticipate to stay in Formula 3 for next year, he's lining himself up to be a real championship contender, I suppose.
Yeah, 15th British winner over there now as well. Had a fantastic performance. Dennis Hauger coming up from 5th to 2nd. Gabriele Mini did a really superb job on the podium. And thankfully, Paul Aron emerged okay after what was a really scary incident up in the S's as well. Chris, we can't not have you on the show and get your opinions as well on this. Tell us what you thought overall on the Macau Grand Prix. Were there any other drivers that stuck out for you?
I mean, of course, Browning was like the absolute king of Macau. And it is interesting because we haven't had the F3 World Cup for a few years now, since 2019. And so that meant that the majority of the grid was actually Macau rookies. There were obviously a few older drivers in there, like Dennis Hauger, who apparently got like a very late call up to fill in that seat as well.
It's Franco Colapinto, wasn't it, that I think he filled in for? Yeah,
exactly. So the fact that he's jumped in, done such an amazing job, I think also kind of confirms that he's more suited to the F3 car than the F2 car, because he's just lost his Red Bull backing for not just next season, but for this weekend in Abu Dhabi as well. So I think he's definitely a lot more comfortable in the Formula 3 car, and that weekend kind of proved it. But Mini was incredibly impressive as well. Had some mega monster saves throughout the two races as well. I think there wasn't an awful lot between Browning and Mini, but what Browning was able to do was just pretty dang astonishing, to be honest.
Yeah, I think we must say a thanks on the show to Michael McClure, our very own Michael McClure, who was there. One of the things he very quickly found out, it was a right rear toe link that snapped in half that caused that heavy crash for Paul Aron, that caused the rear of his car to detach itself. The engine then caught fire, but thankfully he came okay, and the drivers behind, Pepe Marti, Charlie Wirtz, both okay as well, although Wirtz had to retire. I think shout-outs go to Alex Dunn and Dino Beganovic as well. Raffaele Marcello actually also gave a shout-out of his own to Alex Dunn in the press conference, which followed on later in the weekend. So fantastic overall. That's our review of the Macau Grand Prix. Let's get to what this show is really about, though, and that is transfers overall. The biggest transfer, I think we can say, of this week comes from Formula 2. We can't quite say which team this driver is going to be racing for, but we can say that he's going to be featuring on the grid. It was announced earlier this week from Toyota that Formula 2 next year will feature reigning Super Formula and Super GT champion Rotomo Miyata, who's going to be stepping over from Japan to race in Europe for the first time. I mean, Chris, when you look at this guy's CV, he's a Super Formula Lights champion, Japanese F3 vice champion twice. He's a two-time Japanese F4 champion. He's done it all over there, it's fair to say. 24 years old, so he's left it a little bit of time, but Toyota now sending him over to race in Formula 2 and the European Le Mans Series as well. Some people a little bit surprised at this one. Were you surprised at all?
I was a little bit, to be honest. It's a curious decision, I think, by Toyota, but I think their decision has been influenced somewhat by what seems to be a growing relationship with McLaren, and then wanting to be more involved with the Formula One side of things, and indeed the Formula One feeder series as well. The fact that he's doing the European Le Mans Series as well in LMP2 with Cool Racing, I think, is more indicative of what Toyota have planned for Miyata. To be honest, because he's being touted as a potential Kamui Kobayashi replacement in the Toyota Gazoo Racing hypercar as well. He's going to be their reserve driver next year as well. So I think the idea is just get him over to Europe and get him acclimatized to a couple of the circuits. There aren't too many of the same circuits that WEC and F2 race on next year anyway. But it is curious what they have planned for him, and in terms of what team he's going to be driving for next year in F2, all we know is it won't be MP Motorsport, because they're the only team that's announced their full lineup at the moment. But just going on what you were saying about his incredibly impressive CV, doing it all in Japan, he's only the 5th driver ever to win Super Formula and Super GT in the same year, and he's by far the youngest driver to have done so. Wow. But 24 years old, coming into F2, he will be on the older end of the grid next year, especially when the trend at the moment seems to be getting more Pourchaire and Behrman, type drivers, where they come in at 17, 18, something like that. So I'll be really interested to see how he gets on in what is going to be a very different world to what he's become accustomed to in Japan.
And it was something I actually put on Twitter as well, actually, that we could actually now have Super Formula F3 and FRECA champions all together on the grid, which is that would be quite something, wouldn't it? It's going to be absolutely fantastic. If you want to know where Percy and Michael from Feeder Series think he's going to be racing, check out the latest article that has been released on Feeder Series. They have finally put their predictions of what they think the grid is going to be. Last time, I think it got over 23,000 likes. So do go and check that out. It's just been released, and Michael, I think, is scared to walk around the paddock as he's over in Abu Dhabi currently now. Let's continue on. Let's go to the next one. We did have one, as we record this on Thursday evening, we have one F2 announcement and one F1 Academy announcement as well. One of the other F1 teams has now made their announcement on who's going to be representing them in F1 Academy next season. That was Aston Martin, and they have announced that Tina Hausmann will be representing them next year in F1 Academy. She will be racing for Prema Racing. She competed this year in Italian F4, Euro 4, and the Formula Winter Series right at the start of the season in what was her first year racing in single-seaters as well. George, I mean, fairly new to single-seater racing, it's fair to say. How do you think she got on in her first year, and how do you think she could fare next year?
Yeah, I mean, for debut season, not too bad, to be honest with you. The results weren't front running. However, coming into single seaters, fresh from karts, there's obviously, a long way to go, right? And yeah, I mean, being picked up in F1 Academy, it's kind of the best place to be, right? And yeah, with the backing of Aston Martin as well, the prospects are, looking good for next year, of course. And I think for the series as a whole, these are exactly the kind of transfers that are really representative of, I think, where the series should be going. Picking out young drivers that are new to single seaters, and yeah, giving them, I guess, a platform to grow and links to an F1 team, which should forward her significantly.
Yeah, so that's obviously Williams now obviously have Leah Block and Bianca Bustamante with McLaren. Aston Martin have now picked theirs as well. So 7 to go. 3 have already picked. We wait to see who the others will be. Let's go back to Formula 2 now, Chris. We do have a couple of changes to the grid this weekend. One of those being over at MP and Motorsport, Franco Colapinto jumping in. And that's because Jehan Daruvala is waving goodbye to Formula 2 as he now focuses on Formula E, something you've commentated on yourself, of course. Those who were at the London E-Prix would have heard you on the tannoy. What did you make of his decision to move away? I mean, he had 4 seasons at it. Never, I think it's fair to say, given he was third in F3 when he jumped in, never really quite got going. Do you think this is a good decision for him now to step across to Formula E with Maserati?
Yeah, I don't think he gains anything by doing this weekend in Formula 2, to be honest with you. It's worth him putting all his efforts into Formula E preparation now, especially because the season will be starting in sort of mid-January as well. And, they don't get a lot of testing. So every minute in the simulator and with the team really counts there. And you're absolutely right. He never really got to grips with Formula 2. 4 seasons is, way more time than the top drivers should be needing. And it's not like he was racing with underprepared teams. He was racing with Carlin, with Prema, with MP, and he's had a best finish of 7th in the standing. So I think it's safe to say that Jehan just doesn't quite have what it takes to make it into Formula 1. I don't think that's a harsh statement.
No.
And I will admit that Maserati's announcement of Jehan was a bit left field. I think it took quite a few people by surprise, to be honest. So I don't know yet whether Mortara was pushed or jumped from that team to open up that seat. But he's going to be with Max Gunther in the Maserati next year, and I think because Formula E is so different, it might give him more of an opportunity to shine. And they seem to be taking more F2 drivers into Formula E now because they're seeing it as this viable career path as an alternative to Formula 1 now, which is quite nice to see.
Let's break some Transfer Weekly rules and talk quickly about Formula E as we have someone who's commentated on it with us. I mean, exciting calendar, I have to say, that they've got for next season. And as you said, more people jumping into it now. And it's, would you say it's looking an exciting grid for next season?
Absolutely. And they're pushing, the quicker lap times because they've got new tires next year as well. We'll see what happens with this fast charging stuff as well, which might completely revolutionize the championship as well. But for me, the big exciting news is that they're racing at Misano, the World Circuit.
Yes, yeah.
And the Shanghai International Circuit as well, in addition to Portland. So we're going to have 3 proper purpose-built racetracks hosting a Formula E event. Quite what they're going to do with Misano and Shanghai, I'm not quite sure yet. I doubt they'll be using the full straight at Shanghai because that would drain the battery quite considerably. But I'm hugely excited to see what they come up with next year.
Absolutely fantastic. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. It's what fans have been calling out for, isn't it? And they have now delivered on that. Let's go to one of the drivers who is stepping into another seat as well, because another driver not going to be there at Abu Dhabi this weekend is Klemen Novalak. He is leaving his seat at Trident for this weekend, and stepping into it is a man who got on the Formula 3 Championship podium, and that is Paul Aron. So he steps in to race for Trident this weekend at a great season with Prema. Looks very likely, of course, to be jumping into Formula 2 next year. Was running very well until he had that crash at Macau as well. So good to see he jumped out of the car okay and is able to fill this seat. What did you make of this one, George? I don't actually know quite why Clement walked away from this seat for this weekend. I don't know if you can fill us in on that one, but a good opportunity is for Paul to get a round in before a potential full season next year.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest with you, I'm not 100% sure why Novalak's leaving either. However, I think you can draw some parallels to Daruvala's move. I mean, Novalak doesn't have that same, Formula E link that makes that move, I suppose, make more sense. However, yeah, I mean, I know, Novalak is a very popular guy.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't think he's obviously not had the most successful season in the world. Obviously had that win at Zandvoort, which, yeah, to be fair to you, was a great performance, great race. But yeah, I think it makes sense for Aron to get a taste of Formula 2 from his point of view. And I think for Trident, I mean, yeah, there's no I guess no harm in having him there. I mean, for Aron, I think the F2 grid is his goal for next year. And yeah, that's kind of the natural progression, I think, from Formula 3 being third place there, following O'Sullivan up potentially. Yeah, I think, yeah, he should perform. I would say not as well as a top 10, for example. However, yeah, for a first run where ultimately this is all about experience, yeah, you've got to measure your expectations, I think.
Yeah, let's see how he goes. I mean, obviously Trident haven't quite matched their performance level that they do in F3 yet, but let's see. Paul Aron, very, very talented driver, always has been. Even in karting, he's always kept at that incredibly high level, hence why Mercedes backed him very early on. Let's move next to Enzo Fittipaldi. Came in just before our show, really, that he announced that he's staying with Red Bull for 2024. I think Chris is maybe confirms that he's probably going to be back racing Formula 2 next year. How do you rate his season in Formula 2 this year? I mean, 7th going into the finale, got that win at Spa, 4 podiums. Do you think he's had a good year with Rodin Carlin?
I think it's been okay. He hasn't set the world alight, and he is kind of in his second and a half season. Obviously, that first season was just like a smattering of appearances, but his second full season in F2. I think the problem he's got is that there's such a mishmash of talent in the F2 grid this year, and it is a very talented grid, it must be said. You've got that combination of drivers like Pourchaire, who've got good experience in the championship now, but you've also got this string of super talented rookies as well, who would be benefiting from that next year. But of course, there's a new chassis next year, so they're not going to be able to build on that. But for Fittipaldi, I would have said I expected a bit more, particularly from being in a top team like Carlin. But he is the second best Red Bull Junior in the standings at the moment, behind Ayumu Iwasa, who of course still has a slim outside shot at the title going into the final weekend of the season. But what's interesting for me about this announcement is that, according to Rodin CEO David Dicker, Rodin, of course, being the primary partner of the Carlin team for which he races, was that he was anticipating both Enzo and Zay Maloney to be axed by the Red Bull junior team. So I don't know whether he was just misinformed or if they've done a complete 180. Who knows? But yeah, I mean, I would like to see him back on the F2 grid next year for sure. But of course, he's got his uncle who's younger than him, because there's a lot of Fittipaldis coming through the junior ranks at the moment. He's got
Emo,
Uncle Emo coming up quite rapidly actually. So he needs to kind of be looking over his shoulder a little bit.
Yeah, Emo in FRECA, and I think he's staying there. Maybe with Belda. I think he was testing F3. He was. So yeah, he could be in F3 next year. And there'll be a Fittipaldi's in both classes. We will see. We'll keep you posted on this show, of course, as soon as any announcements are made there. Let's talk about, I mean, this session would have happened by the time this show goes out. So I just want to get both your opinions really on what you think of how good it is that all these drivers are getting opportunities to go out in FP1. We won't do predictions or anything like that. I mean, Zach O'Sullivan, probably one of the most standout ones. Great to see such a young driver getting an appearance. But I guess just a question to both of you, how good is it to see feeder series drivers getting opportunities now to go in FP1? Georgia, I'll come to you first on that.
Yeah, I mean, it's exactly what you want to see, really. Yes, I have so many drivers in one session. Yeah, competing. It's great. It's perfect for these guys to be immersed in a high level environment. And yeah, I mean, for someone like O'Sullivan, who obviously is in Formula 3, first F3 level driver since Russell in 2017, to be competing in an F1 session, that's, you can't ask for much more, I suppose. And yeah, there's some drivers in there on that list that I think were potentially aiming for one of those seats next year full time. So yeah, kind of a bit close but not quite there, but yeah, always great experience, and yeah, great to have so many drivers that will be stepping up this weekend.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost like a look into the future, that, Chris, isn't it? When you look at what would have been FP1 by the time this goes out, it's almost a look into the future, isn't it?
I love it. I love this rule that the teams have to run a rookie in each car throughout the season. And I love the fact that most of the teams leave it to the last race as well. The reason being because we have the postseason test as well, where they'll probably use quite a few of the same drivers. Curious one for me missing from that list is Ayumu Iwasa, given that he's going to be driving the AlphaTauri in the postseason test anyway. But, for the likes of Isaac Hadjar and Teo Porcher, who, of course, were in F1 cars during FP1 in Mexico City, but barely got any laps in because of reliability problems. This is another big opportunity for them. Of course, for me, the exciting was obviously Zach O'Sullivan, but for me, Ollie Behrman as well, who is probably my standout driver of the F2 season, being coming in at just 17 years old and being so dang impressive. And of course, the Baku double as well was absolutely mighty as well. So yeah, looking forward to seeing how those guys get on.
We're coming to the end now, so before we wrap up, I think we'll come to what will be our last real subject now, and that's going to be another transfer. Actually, we'll end on one more transfer, although it's not the usual series we cover, but I guess it does relate to that. It includes an F2 driver who his name has been mentioned a couple of times, Chris mentioning him just there, and that's Ayumu Iwasa. We will see him race in Formula 2 this weekend, and perhaps for the last time, because he is going the other way to Rotomo Miyata, as Rotomo Miyata comes from Super Formula to Formula 2. Ayumu Iwasa is going the complete opposite way, joining T. Mugen, who Liam Lawson raced for this season and finished as runner-up. So what do you make of this one then, Chris? I mean, Red Bull Junior, of course. I guess it's something not unusual. We've seen them do it plenty of times in the past. Did it surprise you at all?
It does and it doesn't, because let's be honest, there's not a place on the F1 grid for Ayumu Iwasa at the moment, because they're struggling enough just having Ricciardo and Lawson and Tsunoda and Perez and Verstappen in amongst their current mix of drivers. So getting one of their plethora of junior drivers currently in F2 into F1 is easier said than done. So Super Formula is again kind of becoming this graveyard of F2 interim drivers waiting for an opportunity in F1 to come along. Obviously, that's what Lawson did last year. It's what Stoffel Van Dorn did. It's what Pierre Gasly did after their respective GP2, as it was at the time, title campaigns. So I hope he doesn't just go out there and is kind of left there and forgotten about, because Iwasa's got some really good talent, but I don't see where else is he going to be unless he gets embedded directly into either AlphaTauri or to Red Bull as a test and reserve, and just absorbing all the information he can, because that's likely what's going to happen to Fred Vesti at Mercedes probably. And because there's also rumors that Teo Porcher is going to end up in Super Formula as well.
Okay, that's an
rather than maybe alongside being embedded into the Sauber team as well, which would probably be more beneficial to him. But either way, having a year out or doing a year in Super Formula, I think both have proven to be fine in the end, because obviously Lawson came in and absolutely smashed it in a handful of races in Formula 1. So I hope this isn't the end of Iwasa's rise up to Formula 1.
No, I think we can all agree there. Let's quickly go through some other points. Of course, we had a British F4 signing. Nina Pothoff signed to Fortec next year for British F4. So that grid slowly growing. Calendars all came out for Euro Cup 3, GB3, GB4. I mean, GB3 going to the Hungary. That was the big announcement there for the first time. So 3, I mean, George now, they're doing 3 abroad now. So quite exciting stuff there. Indian F4 is coming back next weekend with a slightly revised calendar as it returns after doing its first round a couple of weeks ago. And post-season testing for F2 will start next week, 29th, 30th of November and the 1st of December as well. We're going to be doing some review videos each day on this channel as well, so keep an eye out for those. And we must say congratulations to the first winners of the Champions of the Future Karting Academy program. This is the new karting championship launched by RGMMC, which is linked with F1 Academy. There's going to be winners of this that get some opportunities with F1 Academy going forward. The first winners over in Al Fossan over in the UAE were Dan Alman, Connor Clancy, James Aganastiadis, Fionn McLaughlin and Peter Stiller as well. Gents, I think that's all we have time for. Thank you very much for joining us for the very first time. Chris, I really hope we hear you back doing Euro Formula Open next year. It's absolutely fantastic to see you in the paddock, first of all, and also hear you on the airwaves, mate. Thank you very much for taking the time to join us on the show.
Oh, cheers. It's been absolutely delightful. I hope to see you back in the paddock next year as well.
Do join us again on the show. And George, thanks for taking the time to join us again. And do keep us updated. You have to come and join us when some GB3 announcements come in.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's a lot to come with the bigger and grid new teams as well. So yeah, a lot to come, I think.
Good stuff. Well, thank you very much. And thank you for watching. As always, do keep an eye out for those daily review videos as testing begins next week. And we'll be back for another episode. As always, that's been it for episode number 3. Do like and subscribe. Leave your comments on who you think is going where. And do check out that article as well. It's going to be in the description below. Percy and Michael's Formula 2 2024 grid prediction. But that is all for now. Enjoy the racing this weekend. We'll be back next week for episode 4. Bye-bye.